"I don't like anything about you, Mother. We want to live with our family alone, so get out." I was dumbfounded by these words, suddenly hurled at me by my eldest son's wife, the same words that were said when I had to leave my parents' home. Now the anger surged in me at the thought of being driven out of this home as well. "Well, I'll leave then," I declared and gathered my belongings to move out. That was the last straw. I swear I'll never forgive my oldest son's wife. It was time to put my plan into action. As a result, my daughter-in-law— my name is Sandra Clark, and I am turning 61 this year. Though I'm technically retired, I'm fortunate enough to still be working. Even though I'm still working, it's not like I'm going to the office every day. I drop in occasionally and attend meetings, but nowadays many meetings are held remotely, and I'm working from home most of the time. My oldest son seems to have the wrong idea that I'm not working anymore. I became a widow in my 40s. Currently, I'm living with my oldest son and his wife. My parents' home is an old house with a large property. It has its issues, but I really liked the place. That was the reason it made moving out difficult. I never had any financial difficulties in my life. Most of my late husband's insurance payout is still untouched. It's a lifestyle where there is no need to worry about my twilight years. Even though it seems like I'm leading a carefree life, I do have some worries. It's my oldest son's wife, Jessica. My son's wife has a strong-willed personality and often clashes with me. This isn't something that just started recently. It started when she came to announce we're getting married. I can't forget the outfit she wore when she first came to introduce herself. She showed up in a tracksuit that she might have worn in high school. She said she wanted me to see her without any pretense, but I think it's an unthinkable act from a common-sense perspective. It might be too much to call it sophistry, but anyway, she's very argumentative, and on top of that, she's very articulate, which makes things difficult. I wondered why my oldest son chose her as his marriage partner. I found out later that Jessica was the one who approached my son. She may be outrageous, but she is beautiful. I think my naive and somewhat sheltered son was smitten by her, even after they decided to get married. It was always the same story with her. If you put it kindly, she's not pretentious. If you put it harshly, she seems to lack common sense in her behavior. I really wanted to oppose their marriage, but I told myself that it's the marriage my son wished for, and I kept my patience. The result is what's happening now. My son didn't want to leave me alone in our family home, so he insisted we live together after the wedding. I had initially thought that Jessica would oppose, but it turned out that Jessica was also in favor of living together. The reason became clear shortly after we started living together. Jessica, however, never did the house chores and left everything to me: cleaning, laundry, meal preparation. She left everything up to me. What's more, she was a full-time housewife. She quit the company she had been working for at the time of the marriage. Even though I don't have to go to work every day, I work remotely, so I have less free time than her. When I'm facing the computer for my job, Jessica would make comments belittling me, saying I'm just playing around. I used to brush it off with a laugh, as it was too troublesome to argue every time, but it certainly irked me when it kept happening. "Jessica, you seem to have quite a bit of spare time. Could you help with the cleaning?" I tried asking this to Jessica, who was idly watching a TV drama. Jessica made a deeply disgusted face. She sighed exaggeratedly and said to me, "The reason I don't do housework is for your sake, Mother. Why don't you understand? It's sad that you can't appreciate my thoughtfulness." She brandished her unique theory and blamed me. According to Jessica, if she does the housework, it would deprive me of my only job. She says that if that happens, seniors become sedentary, which is unhealthy, and there's also a concern about dementia due to lack of stimulation. In other words, Jessica apparently lets me do the housework. Her ridiculous logic almost gave me a headache. "I agreed to live together to make sure you don't slack off, Mother," she said with a half-smile. I was speechless and dumbfounded. I really regret starting to live together. I regret every day that I could have avoided seeing things I didn't want to see if I had stayed separate. Doing housework while being watched by Jessica every day is nothing but agony. Reaching my limit, I decided to talk to my eldest son. It wasn't a complaint about Jessica. I decided to move to an apartment where I could live alone. The house we're currently living in is old and has many level differences. I had hurt my back last year due to my age and deterioration, and there were many hard points for me. I talked to my son about the difficulty of living in this house, and I moved to an apartment. I felt like I had been driven out by Jessica, but I do not regret leaving. The new apartment is a rental. I thought it might be a bit too big for living alone, but I contracted for a room large enough for my grandchildren to stay over in the future. I had the interior customized to my taste, and my own castle was complete. But my joy was short-lived as Jessica began to come over every day and stay until night. "The new apartment is really nice. Isn't it too big for you, Mother?" Jessica said, lounging on the living room couch. "Come on, Mother, come back to your old home and do the house chores. It's for your health and longevity." Unbelievably, Jessica is telling me to go back to the old house and do the house chores during the day. She's so self-centered, and it makes me dizzy. I've already moved out of the house. You need to step up as the wife. I take care of all the house chores here, and my annual checkups are always good. Jessica, there's nothing for you to worry about. Jessica turned her head away, snubbing my words. She intended to pretend she didn't hear them. She always ignored anything inconvenient. Even after that, Jessica came over to my apartment every day. Just the other day, she said it's too much hassle to go back and ended up staying the night. My parents' home and this apartment are about a 15-minute walk apart. It was my eldest son who suggested I live near my parents' home because he was worried. His concern made me a little sad to leave the house. One day, when I had been out on a rare business-related outing, I returned in the evening to a surprise. To my disbelief, Jessica had let herself into my apartment. It seemed she had used the spare key I had given to my son without telling her. "Ah, welcome back," she said, lying on the floor in front of the TV, not even bothering to get up. "Jessica, that spare key is meant to be used in emergencies, not for you to let yourself in when I'm not home." I felt uncomfortable knowing that she'd been in my apartment while I was away. I replied, and for the first time I sternly told her so. She seemed taken aback since she was used to my normally quick-to-forget anger. She shot me an annoyed look, but I stared right back. "You really are a stingy mother-in-law. I can't stand that about you." Jessica began yelling at me. "I can't stand anything about you, even this apartment. We're a family, so you should leave," she said, trying to usher me out the front door. It seems she couldn't stand the thought of me living in this apartment. She was upset that they were living in the old house while I was here, saying it was unfair. "The rent for this place is being paid by James, isn't it? It wouldn't be strange for us, his family, to live here. That's what living beyond your means," she argued. It seemed Jessica thought my son was paying the rent for the apartment, which explained why she was always showing up here. In her mind, the apartment should have been a place for her family to live. "All right, I will leave," I retorted, staring her down. I agreed to move my belongings out within 3 days. Jessica seemed skeptical, demanding I call a moving company in front of her. I immediately called a moving service from my smartphone and scheduled them to come in 2 days. As she left satisfied, I watched her retreating figure and started formulating a plan. I moved out as promised. My new home was an apartment specifically for seniors. I decided to try it out for 2 weeks. I handed over the keys and lease documents to Jessica, asking for a change in the contract through the real estate agent to the landlord. As I've known the landlord for a long time, they were flexible in accommodating, which was a relief. My eldest son was furious with Jessica for kicking me out. He seems to be contemplating divorce, but Jessica doesn't seem to care. On the contrary, she appears to have started living alone in my apartment, declaring, "Well then, let's live separately." I can only marvel at how brazen she is. However, in 5 days, Jessica will come to know the truth. While I was working remotely, my phone began ringing repeatedly. The caller was Jessica. I had been anticipating this, so I had a recorder ready to record the conversation. I pressed the record button on the recorder and then answered the call. "Excuse me, Mother, what's the deal with the rent for this apartment? Why do I have to pay it? This isn't right," she said, clearly flustered. As soon as I picked up the phone, Jessica started ranting. I could tell that she was agitated. "Oh, but Jessica, aren't you the current leaseholder? It's only right that you should pay. Is there a problem?" I deliberately spoke in a calm and leisurely tone to irritate Jessica. The flustered Jessica seemed to become even more agitated. "But didn't James used to pay the rent here? We're not even divorced yet, so shouldn't James pay it?" When Jessica told my eldest son about the rent issue, he informed her that I knew the truth and that she should call me. In reality, there was never a time when my eldest son paid the rent. In fact, I had been financially assisting him. After retiring from my job, I stayed on as a consultant and advisor, earning a decent salary. With my proven track record, I earned far more than my eldest son. It was a misunderstanding on Jessica's part. Originally, I was the one paying the rent for the place, and James didn't pay a dime. Jessica, who had been hoping to enjoy living separately in the new apartment, seemed shocked and taken aback when she learned the truth. She only said what she wanted to say before hanging up the phone. I immediately contacted my eldest son and let him listen to the recorded conversation. He expressed his exhaustion from repaying the debts that Jessica had accumulated, and he agreed to follow my instructions. I first asked him to take paid leave for about 3 days, and then directed him to discreetly move out his important belongings without letting Jessica know. We didn't want her to notice any large trucks, as she might be hanging around nearby. I had instructed him to gradually move things out during the night to a location where Jessica was unaware of. It was a single-family home that I had searched for as a final dwelling. 3 days later, there was another call from Jessica, and she was much more flustered than before. She was almost in a state of panic, explaining that our house was up for sale, and she couldn't get in because the locks had been changed. My eldest son had followed my instructions, sending Jessica's belongings to her parents' house and putting up the house for sale, leaving it empty. As Jessica was almost hysterical, I decided to vent all my built-up stress. I informed her that I was no longer her mother-in-law and that my eldest son had submitted the divorce papers to the city office. It seems that the divorce papers were signed by Jessica a long time ago, as threatening to divorce if he didn't do as she said was apparently a habit of hers. My eldest son had hoped that one day Jessica would change, as she was the person he had loved enough to marry. When threatened with divorce, he had no choice but to give in, as he once told me. But it seems my eldest son has woken up. He signed his name on the divorce papers that were always used as a threat and submitted them. The divorce papers have been formally accepted. You always said to James that you could divorce any time. Aren't you satisfied now that things have gone your way, Jessica?" On the other side of the phone, I sensed Jessica holding her breath. She wanted to retort but couldn't find the words. She must be feeling frustrated. "Besides, I'm worried about you. After the divorce, you can't continue to live in that apartment without working, can you? And moving costs money, too. It's tough. How did you even manage to pay this amount?" I can't believe it. Jessica didn't hide her anger anymore. She yelled at me and continued to curse me. She said she married my son because my late husband left an inheritance. However, I manage all the inheritance and she cannot move a penny of it. She screamed that nothing was going well despite marrying for the sake of repaying debts. Of course, I let my son listen to this conversation as well. If it came to a divorce settlement, the recording is what I was planning to submit as evidence. I thought it was the end, so I patiently waited for Jessica to finish her tantrum. I think she ranted for about 15 minutes with ease. "I'm sorry. I've been disowned by my family. I have nowhere to return. Please help me." In the end, she started begging me for help, crying. She had caused her parents much trouble due to her spending and borrowing habits, and they disowned her. She said, "Come to think of it, I remember feeling something off at the wedding. It clicked for me. That was what felt odd. Jessica with nowhere to go, nowhere to return." I felt a bit sorry for her, but I decided to view it as a consequence of her actions. Apologizing now won't do much. We're strangers now. There's nothing more to discuss. Good luck with your life from here on. I ended the call with Jessica after saying that. I felt a sense of relief after our call. Jessica apparently caused a ruckus at my eldest son's workplace. My son told me the situation escalated to the point of calling the police. When he got home from work, Jessica, who had been squatting at the apartment without paying rent, had her keys changed by the landlord while she was out. Apparently, she can't even get into her apartment now. She probably tried to reach out to me or my son, but we had canceled our cell phones and switched to new ones. We changed our numbers too. I can only imagine the despair she felt upon finding she can't get through no matter how many times she tries. We didn't tell her our new address either, so she can't contact us. After causing a scene at my son's company, she was issued a restraining order. With no other options, she seemed to have turned to her disowned family. When she returned home, she was met with a shocking scene. The luggage I had sent to her family home was left out in the rain in the backyard. She reportedly wasn't even allowed to step foot inside the house. The rent she had not paid for the apartment had been billed to her parents, probably adding fuel to their anger. I heard rumors that she is currently staying in an apartment rented by an organization that supports homeless people. Without the ability to spend as before, she seemed stressed when I passed her on the street. I was stunned at how much her hair had turned white and how dry her skin looked. She had changed so much I hardly recognized her at first. It made me realize just how much a change in living conditions can affect a person. I started a new life in the house I purchased with my late husband's inheritance. I bought a duplex so my son could remarry any time he wanted. For now, my son joins me for dinner, but otherwise, he takes care of his own things. I've come to think that this is just the right amount of distance. The money from the sale of my parents' home is saved for future needs. I plan to use it for my son and his future wife when they marry. Of course, I also need to keep some for any future grandchildren. I'm thinking of setting up the English garden I've always wanted in my new home. On days when I don't work, I go out into the garden and take care of the young trees and herbs. This new life filled with hope has become my daily routine.